Welcome to the Spice Rack. I'm Shannon Spicer, and I'd like to add a little spice to your quilting. This is week 5 of my series, the Spicerack Sampler. Our block for week 5 is called the Empire Star. This design was originally published in Hearth and Home, a magazine circulating from 1885 to the 1930s. This block can also be called Star of the West. If you search either of those names, you'll see that there's a slight variation you can create with this design. I found this particular one in Maggie Malone's book, 5500 Quilt Block Designs. It really caught my eye, and I knew I had to include it in this series. If you're just now joining in on this series, check out my channel to see the other blocks and tutorials. This is a 12-block series of classic blocks that I'm remaking in a modern way. You can download the pattern for this week's block by clicking the link below in the description. And for more information about this set, visit my blog. This block, just like last week's, can be made 2 different ways, with flying geese units or half-square triangles. I'm going to demonstrate the half-square triangle method here, but I include instructions for both methods in the pattern. As I said, this is going to use half-square triangles, and my favorite method is the 4 at a time method, where you take 2 squares, you put them right sides together, and you'll notice throughout this series that I really don't pin much. I really don't like to pin. I just match them up and put them over on the machine. It doesn't matter if they're perfectly placed together because there's a little bit of leeway room with trimming with this method. You start in the corner, 1/4 inch in, and you sew completely around the perimeter, 1/4 inch seam allowance, until you get back to the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these together and then come back and show you how to cut them into pieces and trim them up. Okay, here we have all 4 of our items that are sewed all the way around the edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I will line up my ruler from point to point, and you want to make sure you're in a position where you can move your ruler the opposite way, because we're going to cut one way and then the other way. My blade is in, so I'm not going to cut my fingers. You want to position your piece so that you can cut one way and the other without shifting and moving your piece. So I'm going to cut this way, and then without moving the piece, I'm going to move the ruler and line it up on the opposite points. So now we have 4 pieces, and then we will press these open, and we will have our little half-square triangles. Okay, now that we have all of our half-square triangles all trimmed up, we start to lay them out in the appropriate configuration. There's so many things you can do with the half-square triangles. They're such a versatile shape. You can arrange them in a variety of ways. Let's see, if we turn this like this, and turn this here, we get an interesting block like that. And then we could turn them this way, and we get a square and a square. Let's see. If we turn them around like that, we have what's called the pinwheel shape. But for this particular one, we've got 16 of these, so we need to lay them out according to the pattern. And we see that 2 of them together make a parallelogram. That's handy. That is the top half of our block, so we will just mirror it for the bottom half. And since I chose to just do this in 2 different colors, 2 solids, I used Motabella mustard, Motabella solids in mustard, and Kona cotton in bone. I could actually flip all of these around, and I could have the reverse of the design if I wanted to. And there we go, the reverse. We have the cream color as the background and the gold as the main design. But I think for my purposes, I'm actually going to switch it where the gold is the background and the cream is the main design. Okay, so now we will sew the whole top row together, each piece to create the top row, then sew all the pieces in the second row together, and sew on for the third row and the fourth row, and then we will attach the first row to the second row and sew on to the third row and the fourth row. Pressing our seams as we go. I probably will press mine open so that they will lay as flat as possible, and then we will have the completed block. Okay, I've got each row sewn together and my seams are pressed open. As I said, that typically will help your pieces lie flat the best. I don't always press open, but I try to from time to time when I feel like it's necessary. And if you'd like to see how I press open, because pressing open is a little bit more tedious, if you'd like to see how I press my seams open, go back to the first video in this series for the rail fence block. I show how I do it on that video. So now I'm going to flip these over, and as soon as we attach these rows together, it will be a complete block. But I also was noticing some neat designs that came about as I was rearranging these. That's kind of neat like that. There are so many things, like I said, there's so many things you can do with the half square triangles. I really like that. But for today, we're putting it together like this. Okay, so I'm going to attach row 1 to row 2, and then when those are attached, attach them to row 3, and then attach the whole thing to row 4. Okay, and here we have the complete block. With this design, it is a square, so you could actually turn it and use it this way in a design if you'd prefer. I explored some different ways you can use this block on my blog, doing some different mock-ups using EQ8. And this week, I remembered to backstitch just a little bit at the beginning of each of my blocks on my top row, and then a little bit at the end of my blocks on the bottom row, and then when I attached each row, a little bit on both sides too. So that this whole block now has each exposed seam has a little back stitching, so it's a little more secure. I don't always backstitch when I piece my pieces together for quilting, but with a block like this, I'm going to set it aside, and I'm not going to use it for a while, and it's going to stay in a pile, and I'm going to move it around a bit, so I want it to be a little more secure. If I'm working on a quilt where I'm just making a bunch of blocks quickly and then putting those blocks together in complete rows and columns, I don't really think about it too much. But it always annoys me when little parts start to come apart, especially if it's on the edge where you might be doing the binding or something and you have to go back. I've had to go back with a needle and thread and hand stitch them together since they're opening up. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You can download the pattern using the link in the description below, and next week we'll be making the railroad block. If you'd like to be alerted when each pattern is released, you can sign up for my newsletter by following the link in the description. Thank you for watching this, and let me know what you think of this unusual design in the comments below.